Things gon' change when I really hit the field. Undefeated chance, man, you know what's the deal. Tryna find a kid, I'm in the field doing drills. Boy, you just a sucker, you ain't never keep it real. 3 rings in my hand, I'm a warrior to the max. When I hang it up, they gon' have to give me plaques. Step up in the building and I only bring the facts. When I make a highlight, they gon' replay, run it back. Okay, always locked in, I don't got time to lax. Saying he the best, he could take a lap. Batted 1,000 when you check the stats. Boy, is you ready? You ain't gotta ask. I just really hit the field. 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 Boy, I'm about to hit the field.
Welcome to a double feature, the second part of the Hitting the Field podcast on the week of November 11th. Today, though, is Wednesday, November 13th. And mid-November only means one thing around these parts. Football. Yesterday we talked NFL with Mr. Chris Chan and Mr. Q Rodriguez. Go check that out on iTunes, on our YouTube page at Hitting the Field. But today we're talking the collegiate level. And Jeremy Brener here as always. But joining me today, we got to my far left the host of Hitting the Field's newest spin-off series, might I add. All things UCF. This guy knows CFB better than anyone I know, except for maybe Chris Wolf here. Kyle Partain. KP, it's finally got you on the show. How you doing, man?
Bro, it's been way too long. Glad to be here. Glad to be talking some football.
Football.
It's gonna be a good time.
No, it's football with a W.
Football.
We talking football today. There's no L at the end. It's just football. Football. Okay. And of course, in the middle, the man in the middle, Mr. Chris Wolf, joining me again to talk some more college football. Chris Wolf, what's going on, brother?
Doing pretty good, bro. I mean, I'm ready. I'm just ready for the stretch of this season. The down to the wire.
Down to the wire, the nitty gritty. I ran out of superlatives.
It's okay. It happens.
It happens. All right. But so the second unveiling of the college football playoff came out last night. And
I'm gonna give a preemptive boo.
A preemptive boo from Kyle Partain over there. I'm not sure if they can hear you without the mic, but
I'm gonna give a preemptive boo.
All right, a preemptive boo. You want to give it now?
Yeah, boo. I'll explain later, but there's a big boo for you. I'll get into it as we get down to the number.
That was such a subtle boo.
I'll give you a little sneak peek. I disagree with number 5.
Can you do the boo again?
Boo.
No, that wasn't it. You have to be subtle. It just boo.
Boo. It's November. We're still saying boo in here.
Anyway, yeah, it's still spooky season because we have the second unveiling right here. LSU number 1. I think that was expected, with Ohio State number 2, falling from 1 to 2. Clemson moving up 2 spots to number 3. Georgia moving up to number 4. And Alabama, after their loss, moving down from 3 to 5. And Oregon, Chris Wolf's Oregon Ducks, coming in at number 6.
Yeah.
But we're going to start off at the top of the heap. LSU, coming off of that big win in Tuscaloosa. Kyle Partain, is this number 1 ranking justified?
It's been justified for a long time coming. I don't know how they weren't ranked number 1 in the first CFP poll. This just showed that, LSU truly is the best team in the country. Now, give Ohio State credit, they've looked good, but you just can't compete with LSU's resume. They've got a win in Tuscaloosa over now number 5, then number 3, Alabama. They've got a top, 11 win in Florida. They've got a top 12 win in Auburn. They've got a top 19 win in Texas. No one else is even close to that kind of resume.
That's true.
It's not like LSU's squeaking by these games. Now, granted, the score was close against Alabama, but LSU looked like the better team throughout that entire game. Granted, there was that comeback led by Tua. It wasn't even Tua. It was Najee Harris. But LSU looks good. They've justified that number 1 spot for several weeks in a row now, and they're finally getting rewarded for that.
Chris, do you agree with KP or do you disagree?
I agree.
All right.
I mean, LSU, hands down, best team in the country. I think they got the Heisman Trophy winner right now in Joe Burrow. Unless he literally just falls off and just nothing goes right, he will win the Heisman this year. Ohio State, I think if you look at the eye test, I think Ohio State's look better. It's just that they don't have the resume. Their resume is just not as good.
It's not as qualified as LSU.
You have a top 15 win against Wisconsin. That's a good win. You dominated them. But other than that, they really don't have much. But they do have a couple tests against Penn State and Michigan, so they will have a chance to show out against some pretty good opponents, two more top 15 teams. Clemson is almost like the irrelevant team in my opinion, as long as they went out. Mm-hmm. If they went out, they're like irrelevant. They're getting in, no matter if it's one, 2, 3, 4. They're getting in.
I want to shift our focus back though to LSU and Ohio State a little bit at least. So Ohio State came in as the number 1 team in the first unveiling of the rankings. I think a lot of people were. I mean, it wasn't like, a surprise because, Ohio State doesn't deserve to be number 1, but it was more of, they don't necessarily have the resume. Like, LSU's resume was still stronger than Ohio State's last week, and they were the number 2 team versus Ohio State was number 1. And you look at, but here's the thing. You mentioned that the eye test, Chris. Ohio State might be seen as a better team than LSU. Do we think after this weekend that's changed? Or KP, you're nodding your head. So I can tell you feel passionate about this. So you just let it out.
Yeah, so we're looking at the previous week's rankings right now, and you brought up an interesting point of even last week when Ohio State was ranked number 1, did they have the resume? The clear answer is no at that point.
But they were number 1.
They were number 1, but they shouldn't have been. Now, they look great. Don't get me wrong. But when your best win is 13 Wisconsin, and LSU's sitting in there with 2 ranked wins that are better than your best ranked wins. Well, this was last week.
Yeah, as of last week, yes.
This is before Alabama. You're looking at a win over Florida and a win over Auburn, which are both better than Ohio State's win over Wisconsin.
Okay.
And then I guess they're getting a lot of credit for destroying Cincinnati early in this season.
Yeah?
Because Cincinnati, I mean, they're respected, but you look at them, they were 20, now 17. I just don't... Mm-hmm. I don't think that resume is really going to be good enough at all to keep up with LSU. LSU's going to win the West. They're going to win the SEC West. They're going to get another top 4 matchup in Georgia because Georgia's going to close out the SEC East this week when they take on Auburn. I think Georgia wins. They'll get another top 4 win right there. I'm not sure there's anything Ohio State can do to catch them. Do I think Ohio State is more deserving and looks better? Maybe. But
that doesn't answer the question.
You got to give Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow won the Heisman, and LSU. I don't know. We talking more deserving or looks better? What are we?
I mean,
I do have one thing to say about the Ohio State thing. Is the committee factoring in that Chase Young might be suspended 4 games potentially? They might not have him for the rest of the regular season and a Big Ten championship potentially, because that's what it would be. He would not play in any of those games if he gets that suspension.
So the first rankings were pre-suspension. I don't think LSU and Ohio State flipping is a result of that. I think it is a direct result of just LSU winning on the road against Alabama, probably arguably the best win of the season. But I mean, that is something to keep in mind. At the end of the day, though, the beauty of the college football playoff is it doesn't really matter if you are 1, 2, 3, or 4 as long as you're in. Mm-hmm. And I think, especially when it comes to LSU and Ohio State, the only way to really figure out which team is better is if the two play against each other. And that could very well be the national championship this year if the cards fall in the right direction. But you did mention Chase Young, and that's where I want to go next. Ohio State, number 2 in the country. They did not play this past week, right? Or they did.
No, they did. They might as well have not played. They
59-point win against Maryland.
Yeah, Maryland isn't even a team.
So they participated.
Exactly.
And they did what they were supposed to do. So I didn't 59 points.
They could have played without Justin Fields and still won that
Yes,
game.
exactly. But here's the thing. So Ohio State, what does the outlook look like now without Chase Young?
I still think they're easily able to win the get the Big Ten championship, but I will have to say we will find out against Penn State how much they will really miss them against a team. They were very uncharacteristic against Minnesota. They don't turn the ball over that much, but they turn the ball over a lot against them, and we're going to see if they still have a good pass rush without Chase Young, because that is easily, in my opinion, the best player in the country. It's just the fact is, he doesn't play quarterback, so he's not going to get Heisman consideration. Even I had him in my top 5 before the suspension, but
absolutely,
we're going to see
top five placement for Heisman. Yeah. At the end of the day, I don't think it changes the outlook a whole lot. I still think Ohio State is that much better than everyone else in the Big Ten, even without him. And I think last week, granted it was Maryland, that's a reflection of how good they still are, even without him. I think, like Chris said, Penn State will obviously be the test. Was it 2 weeks from now when they play Penn State?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I believe it's
after this week. Yeah.
Where is the game being played?
I think it's Happy Valley. Oh, it's in Columbus.
I think it's in Columbus.
I wouldn't worry. Well, there's always reason for concern when you play they will be a top 10 team when they play. There's always reason for concern. And Penn State's earned that top 10 ranking. They're a good team. But even without Chase Young, I don't see the pass rush falling off that much from Ohio State. All they have to do, Minnesota gave them the blueprint how to beat Penn State last week. All you have to do is apply enough pressure. You don't have to sack. You don't have to be flooding the backfield every single play. Provide enough pressure and
force them to play quarterback, kind of.
Right,
exactly.
Sean Clifford had to throw a lot, and he
forced
threw
Clifford
3
to
picks.
throw.
He threw 3
exactly.
picks. And including the game sealer. And some of them weren't good throws either. I mean, that's what you got to do. But if you let Penn State run the football, you let Penn State control the line of scrimmage, they could play keep away.
Right. And I think part of that was kind of what LSU did on Saturday against Bama with Clyde Edwards. Hello. that's what I'm referring to him as. So yeah, I think
football.
But I think that honestly that's what it's gonna come down to at the end of the day is what team can control the line of scrimmage against in any of these games down the stretch. There's so many games down the stretch that have meaning. The Ohio State Penn State game has meaning. The Alabama Auburn game has meaning. The SEC championship has meaning. There's just so many games that are coming up that will have a huge impact on how the playoffs work. And another one of those games, I kind of want to jump a little bit further down the line here at number 8, number 9, Minnesota Penn State. We kind of briefed on it a little earlier, but I kind of want to go a little more in depth. So Minnesota, first top 10 ranking in 57 years.
Congrats to PJ
57 years.
Congrats to PJ Fleck.
They have been outside of the top 10 for 57 straight years. This year, first time they were in the top 10 since 1962.
Coach of the year.
I was not alive then.
Really? Oh, I was.
Coach of the year for
because KP's a grandfather.
That's right. But congrats to Minnesota. They've absolutely deserved this. That was special season up there. PJ Fleck's got the boat rolling. He's got the boat rowing the boat, not rolling,
and
rowing.
This isn't
either or works.
Same thing.
This isn't Fleck's first Cinderella season. I mean, Western Michigan got to the Cotton Bowl against Wisconsin.
I love that you consider a Power 5 team a Cinderella team. How cool is that?
But I mean, okay, but is this team a Cinderella team? And we talked about this last week. Is this team a Cinderella team, or does this team have a legit shot? You know, Chase Young's no longer playing for Ohio State. Ohio State is on a collision course to meet in that Big Ten championship. But also, I mean, look, imagine this. If Penn State beats Ohio State, Minnesota meets Penn State in that Big Ten championship.
You already have a win against them, too, so...
So, is this more than a Cinderella story, or is that all that it is, KP?
Let's as much as I love this story and this situation that Minnesota's in, let's pump the brakes here for a second. This was the biggest game that Minnesota's had at home in however many years against Penn State.
57 years.
Yeah, a long time. There are a lot of emotions. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of energy. Minnesota played a near-perfect game and came away with 5-point victory. What was it, 5?
Yeah, it was a 5-point victory.
5-point victory.
In a game that they were favored to lose by a touchdown.
Right, but they have to travel on the road to Iowa this week. Then they still have to play Wisconsin in the finale of this, in the regular season finale. They need to focus on winning the Big Ten West before they worry about facing anyone else from the East.
Yeah,
they are not guaranteed to win this West division. I still think Wisconsin should be the favorite. I do believe Minnesota's appearance in the top 10 will be a brief one. I think there's a big upset next week in Iowa City.
Iowa City.
And I think it's going to be a big letdown for Minnesota. I hope I'm wrong, because I really like this Minnesota squad. I really like PJ Fleck, but I do believe Minnesota is on serious upset alert this week, and I think Iowa's going to win, not easily, but it's not going to be a nail-biter.
I look at, obviously, yes, Minnesota played as good of a game as you could do. The quarterback, Tanner Morgan, 18-20, over 300 yards. He has multiple games where he's completed over 90% of his passes, at least throwing 20 passes.
That's an A.
That's ridiculous to see. He's really good. They have great receivers. Bateman, Tyler Johnson. They got good receivers, and they got a solid running game. And they have a great defense. They have one of the best DBs in the country, Antoine Winfield Jr. Absolutely. That dude is really good. That dude's a stud. He set the tone early with that pick. He's one of the best DBs in the country. But I will have to agree with Kyle. Iowa City is a very hard place to play. And we all know that. Ohio State knows that. Michigan knows that. They all know that Iowa City is a tough place to play.
So let me ask you guys this. What does Minnesota need to do in order to earn your full throttle, let's go? Because the thing is, Minnesota, the players of Minnesota, they're not playing for the best season in 57 years. They're playing for a title. They believe that they got a shot at this, and this weekend proved that. What does Minnesota need to do in order to earn your consideration for them as a contender and the country's consideration for them as a contender? Do they need to beat Iowa? Do they need to win out? Do they need to beat Ohio State? Like, what will it finally be for them to earn the top respect for you?
It's tough because if they can go into Iowa and take care of business, not just win a close game, but they could take care of business, that will prove something to me, in my opinion. That will prove a lot for me. That means this team can go on the road and win in a hostile environment against a top 25 team. They haven't done that. They did that home game. They haven't done it on the road. And I think when you do it on the road, it means a lot. Like LSU just did that. They went on the road to probably the toughest place to play in college football and just dominated.
Yeah,
Alabama. A 5-point win or not, it was dominant. Led wire to wire. It was a wire to wire that led the whole game. So that's the thing.
KP, what does Minnesota need to do in order for you to consider them as a contender?
This is a tricky question, and I want to make it clear. I believe they're a contender already, but just because I think they're a contender doesn't mean I don't think they're capable of losing. Georgia, everyone sees Georgia as a contender, right? Georgia lost to South Carolina, who's a terrible team. Upsets happen. Teams that are contenders lose games they should not lose. We've seen it, however many teams, it's a vast majority of the teams in the college football playoff have a loss.
And you've had two teams. Two teams have made the playoff losing to a losing record team.
So while I do believe Minnesota is a contender, and I think if they win out, they're absolutely in. I even think a one-loss Minnesota has a shot if they win the Big Ten title.
Really?
I think a one-loss Minnesota that wins the Big Ten title has a shot to get in. But that doesn't mean they're not capable and not susceptible to losing upsets. And right now, I would take Georgia to lose in Iowa City. I would take Utah to lose in Iowa City. So that is a tough place to play, and there's no denying that. We've seen top 3, top 4 teams go in Michigan and get handled before. So it's not a matter of whether Minnesota's a contender or not. It's a matter of whether or not Iowa plays to the standards of their home field.
That's fair.
Iowa, they beat Ohio State by over 3 touchdowns one year. They completely obliterated them.
I think any place is difficult to play at this point in the season if you have a legit team. Because in college football, just the environment's different than in any other game, I think. Whether on any level, high school, NFL, XFL.
Oh, the passion is so much more. It's so much more present.
Yeah,
in college
of course. So I kind of want to climb up the rankings back again to number 4 and number 5 here, Georgia and Alabama.
Boo.
We're going back. You want a preemptive boo?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Georgia, number 4 in the rankings. 1 loss Georgia. Their loss to South Carolina. It's I think it's safe to say that it is a worse loss than Alabama's loss to LSU. Yet, Georgia is ahead of Alabama. Do you agree with Georgia being ranked ahead of Alabama?
Yes. But this is...
Speak your mind.
This is where the committee has very difficult decisions to make. And a lot of their selection criteria is about to be judged really difficult because you look at these two teams, Georgia, Alabama, and Georgia clearly has the worst loss, in my opinion, of any top 10 team.
But they have the best win out of the two teams. Is that what you're saying?
They also have a win over Florida, which is huge.
Wins.
I guess if you're counting Notre Dame as a quality win, Georgia has that win.
Notre Dame is the top 20 team, so
you have Notre Dame, you have Florida. That is much better than anything Alabama can put even close on their resume right now.
A&M and Duke.
You look at that. Duke has a losing record. A&M has 3 losses. And you look at these two teams. Yes, Alabama lost a very close game. 5
to the
points,
number one team in the
number 1 team in the
country.
country. But at some point, you see last week, Clemson was knocked to number 5 because of strength of schedule and because of their resume. Mm-hmm. Alabama sits at 3 with a far, far inferior resume than Clemson. And we see that name brand is saving Alabama. And I think, I'm going to go on a little mini rant here, but the committee just gave Alabama the most realistic playoff path possible. Look at this. Look at the way this sets up with the rankings.
That's exactly where I was going next. But yeah,
LSU. Let's say what everyone expects LSU Georgia to run the table and meet in the SEC championship, and I do believe that will be the case. And I believe Alabama runs the table from here on out. Those 3 teams end up at 12-0, 11-1, and 11-1 respectively. And LSU will beat Georgia in the SEC championship. Georgia is now behind Alabama. Alabama bumps up to number 4. And regardless of what Oregon does, I do believe Oregon beats Utah in the Pac-12 championship. Alabama has that win over Auburn that Oregon does not. Oregon loses to Auburn as a common opponent. Alabama beats Auburn. There is no way, in my eyes, that the committee values Oregon over Alabama because of that. And as long as LSU handles Georgia and takes care of business in the SEC championship, I firmly believe a Alabama team that does not deserve to be there is essentially a lock for the playoffs.
So, do you think it might have been like I don't want to say they were, like, it's a benefit for them to lose the game, but, Chris, was it a benefit for them to lose this game?
It is very hard for me to talk about this, but it's starting to look that way because it's very hard. It's very hard to just to look at this and just be like, this team lost a game 3 weeks before, with still 3 games left, and just like, and then it seems like we're gonna make the playoff because we get 2 bunnies against losing record Mississippi State, Western Carolina.
They have to go on the road to play Auburn, though.
It's a tough game because Auburn's offense, it's not good. I mean, it's not good offense, but that defense, I think the
Iron Bowl changes people. That's the thing. I think players care more about the Iron Bowl than they do any other game of the season.
I'm actually
the fans care more. There's more of a it's a rivalry. I think and the thing is, Auburn wants nothing more than to spoil Alabama out of a playoff spot because they know that Alabama cannot lose, and if they lose, they're out of the playoffs. But let me ask you this: say Alabama wins this weekend, LSU loses. Would that have put LSU in Alabama's position now?
No, because you still because you have that resume, you can afford one loss. Like LSU literally doesn't. So a loss to anybody would still put them in the playoff, no matter where it's at.
LSU, arguably, the schedule they have coming up, it's a easily winnable schedule. Did they make the top 4 after this win?
Yes, I think they did. Because all they gotta do is win the regular season. Does not matter what happens in the SEC championship.
So let's say this: they meet Georgia in the SEC championship. They lose to Georgia.
They're in.
Georgia and LSU are both in.
Yep, absolutely. Both.
Georgia's won. LSU, I think, is 4. That's a rematch. They're gonna do I didn't do a rematch.
No, it would not be a rematch. There's no way the committee would put a rematch. I think in that scenario, Ohio State's 1, Clemson 2, LSU 4, and Georgia would sneak up at number 3. So it would be Clemson, Georgia, and we'd still get that LSU-Ohio State matchup at just the 1-4 in the semifinals.
But you didn't shake your head. You said that LSU did not get into the top 4.
Yeah, I don't believe they've locked up a playoff spot yet. There is one game left on this schedule that can totally derail everything.
Which is
Arkansas. If you manage to lose to Arkansas, I don't believe LSU will lose. Let me throw that out there.
I get what you're saying, but also I don't think that
Western
that can
Kentucky
happen.
and San Jose State have beaten them.
If LSU somehow manages to lose to Arkansas, they should not be considered a lock, and they are required to win the SEC championship in that scenario.
Because at this point, honestly, LSU's a lock to at least play in the championship after this weekend. Unless
absolutely chaos.
Unless absolute chaos happens and they lose multiple games. They need to lose 2 games in order to.
So you win one. All you gotta do is win one. They win 2 games. But I mean, they get Ole Miss and Arkansas.
Okay, so our LSU made it to the championship.
Yeah, it's all but.
So the one game that they have to make sure that they win is a easily probably one of the easier teams in the schedule, Arkansas. They just fired their head coach, mind you. So, I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying, and of course there should never be any guarantees in college football. But so hypothetically speaking, LSU's in that SEC championship representing the Western Division. Georgia is penciled in. I think we can put it in pencil.
If Georgia wins this week, they lock up the East if Georgia wins this week. And I do believe they want to take care of business. If they don't take care of Auburn this weekend, all of a sudden there's pressure. And A&M's not a gimme. It's not a tough team to play. But
it's a team that, if you aren't careful enough, could give you some problems.
I don't think Georgia wants to play around here. I think Georgia's going to lock up the East real quick.
I've seen A&M. They have lost to Clemson and Alabama, but they were able to put points on Bama, and they kept it relatively close with Clemson. It wasn't close, but it was 24-10. So it wasn't the worst thing, but that was also in Death Valley. So anything can happen. A&M they have the talent to, I think, push Georgia around, at least push it somewhat close.
Yeah.
Because Jimbo Fisher is still a great coach.
He is.
So, and he can get teams ready for a big game. He knows how to do that.
For sure.
He did that last year against Clemson last year. He was probably the closest team to beating Clemson last year, other than maybe Syracuse. But they were playing with a third-string quarterback right then. Mm-hmm. But they were the closest team, I think, when they were fully healthy, to beating Clemson.
Right. So, I think... So I just want to get this straight. Let's assume that it chalks up. LSU plays Georgia in the SEC championship, and Georgia beats LSU. Alabama's out.
Oh, absolutely. Alabama has no prayer. They would,
because there's no space. There's no space for them.
In that scenario, if they win out and Georgia wins the SEC championship, Georgia and LSU are both in the playoffs. They both make it. There's no way both of those teams aren't in. There's not enough chaos that can happen.
You piggybacking off this?
Yeah, you can't. Bama literally only can get in if Georgia loses. There's no way. If it just doesn't, because LSU has the head-to-head. There's just no way. And you're not gonna, even though Clemson's played a terrible schedule, so is Bama, and they're undefeated on their schedule, and Alabama's not. So and your best wins. Yeah, you might have a better win than Clemson potentially, but undefeated 0 in the loss column has to mean something. Oh,
absolutely.
And yeah, you might have had a tougher game, but the strength of schedules are identical-ish, if you want to say the least. And Clemson would have a conference championship. I mean, conference championships do mean something. Remember, if you don't have a conference championship, you got to the entire committee has got to be like 100% sure that they're a top 4 team. So
yeah,
that's the thing.
So I mean, here's the argument here, and I kind of want to slide a little bit further down the polls with Oregon and Utah. Now, KP, you mentioned it a little earlier in the show. Bama as a one-loss non-conference championship trumps Oregon as a one-loss Pac-12 champion. Granted, they both would have the Auburn game as a good comparison, but if they win, Oregon has to beat Utah, and Utah is a better win than Auburn. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. That Utah's a better win than Auburn, but at the same time, the committee they've shown they do not value the Pac-12 to the extent that they value the SEC.
Fair.
This is probably
We're looking at 3 SEC teams in the top 5. Yeah. Now, granted, 6 and 7 are both Pac-12, so I will give them that. There is a sense of respect for these top 2 teams, but the way the schedule plays out and the way the rankings have played out, Oregon is going to have to hammer Utah to get into these playoffs. They're not going to squeak by. They cannot afford to squeak by anymore. They have to absolutely obliterate Utah.
We've had something similar with Baylor and TCU in the first one. They technically can win a conference. They never played a game though. So this is the similar thing. Ohio State was not getting in that year unless they hammered Wisconsin, and they 59-0 when Wisconsin was favored to win that game. Mm-hmm. If Oregon goes in, the last time Oregon was in the Pac-12 championship, it was like they beat Arizona by over 35 points. Mm-hmm. They got to do something like that. They got to win like 56-17 or something. And they do something. They
got to make it so hard for the committee to not ignore them and ride them off as, oh, you're a West Coast team, we don't want you even.
And I think what does help Oregon, that maybe like an Oklahoma wouldn't have as a one-loss team, is that Oregon is one of 4 teams with a top 12 defense and offense total. So that's something.
I think
to
there's
consider.
a reason why Oregon and Utah are both ahead of Oklahoma at 1 loss.
The defense,
and also I think the Pac-12 has been slightly better than the Big 12 this season, and I think what we learned from this week was that Baylor, even if they, I just don't think they can win out. I think that team is going to have a really difficult time against Jalen Hurts in Oklahoma when they play next weekend.
Remember, they're the highest ranked 9-0 Power 5 team. Like the worst ranked, the lowest ranked team.
Yes, and their number they dropped a spot this week because Minnesota moved up, and they couldn't even move up in their 9-0. You have 2 loss teams ahead of them. Florida and Auburn are at 2 losses, and they're ranked ahead of Baylor.
What if Auburn were to pull an upset on like Georgia or Bama? How can you? There's no way that Auburn can stay behind them, even with 3 losses. I feel like
let's pump the brakes here. This is exactly what people were saying about Minnesota a week ago today. Minnesota clearly proved that they can win these kinds of games. Give Baylor a chance. Let's see what happens. Do I believe Baylor's going to win? No.
Baylor's going to have to beat Oklahoma twice, probably.
An undefeated Baylor team, if they run the table and they're a Big 12 undefeated conference champion, I firmly believe they should be in the playoffs.
But I think the way I feel about Baylor is the way you feel about Minnesota. I think they're great, and I think, yeah, of course, undefeated, you're in, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
No, I don't think they're going to run the table either. Even if they beat Oklahoma this weekend, they're going to have to still beat Texas. They're still going to have to go and play Oklahoma again in the Big 12 championship.
Texas already played spoiler to Kansas State.
Yeah, I don't
and you also need to remember, Texas, yeah, they have 3 losses. They hung better with LSU than Bama did, I feel like. That's the thing. They hung better. They did hang better.
I don't know about better. Those were essentially identical games. They both came down to the onside kick, if y'all remember.
But Texas was better throughout the game. They didn't dig themselves a huge hole. They were able to stay within
LSU was up 3 touchdowns in halftime.
I agree.
And I think the game was won, in my opinion, in the second quarter. In that game, LSU and Bama.
The pick touchdown sequence. There were 2 touchdowns in the last 36 seconds or whatever it was in the first half.
That won the game. Because it was, a 5-point game?
Yeah, it absolutely won the game.
So, okay. Here, we're going to put our crystal ball here, our imaginary crystal ball. KP, I want you to give me your top 4 as what you believe will be the final 4. Go.
Who I believe will be the final 4. I think LSU is in. I think Ohio State will be in, and I think Clemson will be in. I think those 3 are easy. It all comes down to the number 4 spot. What I believe is different from what I want, and I believe...
What do you believe, and then tell me what you want? Or tell me what you want first, and then tell me what
I want. I want to see the Pac-12 champion.
Okay.
I want to see the Pac-12 champ. What I believe, Alabama. I think Alabama gets the 4 spot. I believe Alabama gets 4.
I had literally the same exact top 4 for both. Like I believe the committee's going to put Bama in just because of just name. Even though Oregon is a big name, it's just that they're not bigger. They're just not as big. They're one of the biggest named national championship teams. But what I would want to see the committee do, is put their foot down and be like, you need to win your conference. You cannot get in it over. Yes, you would have a win against Auburn, but Oregon would have a better win. And I just think and also if you put Bama in, you're literally just telling Oregon you just missed the playoff in the last 9 seconds of the season opener. You literally just told them that. In the last 9 seconds of the season opener, you told them you're not making it, no matter if you're on the table. That's literally what you would just tell them.
Yeah.
And I think that I actually believe the committee likes big wins because Georgia has a terrible loss, but because they have better wins, they're
ahead
over
of
Bama.
Bama.
Just because Oregon lost to Auburn, even though it's a common opponent, Oregon will have a better win. They might do that. I want them to do that, but I just don't believe they're going to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think I care as much about conference championships as you do, Chris. At the end of the day, if you have earned the spot, like for example, if LSU loses the SEC championship, they have earned a spot, even if they aren't SEC champions. I don't think I care as much about conference champions. What I do care about is playing your schedule and winning games that you need to win. If your resume is awful and you did not run the table, you should not be in the playoffs. You have to prove that you can beat top competition. And Alabama has not proven that they can beat top competition.
They also did put last night. They put Oregon and Alabama's strength of record and strength of schedule next to each other. Oregon beats them in strength of record and strength of schedule right now, even with the LSU game.
Right,
they still have a better one.
Right,
and they're probably gonna have a top 8 Utah team to add to that too. So it's gonna be their strength of record and schedule is going to be better if they run the table.
Yeah. So one I think kind of an afterthought in all of this is Clemson, and we really haven't talked a lot about Clemson just because I feel like they're kind of on their own island and they're just playing their schedule, winning their schedule. Clemson. I just want to just briefly go over this, and Clemson needs to win out in order to make it to the top 4, right?
Demon Deacons this weekend.
They play the Demon Deacons this weekend.
No, Clemson and Dabo will be having their pizza party at the end of the season.
Okay.
They're running the table. It's not going to be close.
What kind of pizza?
Well, I would hope not pineapple, not Hawaiian.
Well, but from what pizza place though?
Whatever they choose. I don't know what kind of pizza place.
It's probably
they
the
have
sponsor of the
whatever local place. They'll probably do something local, or maybe like a Domino's, whatever sponsors. I don't know.
Pizza Hut,
maybe?
I don't know.
Check your pizza with the name, with the word pizza in the name.
They're gonna have that.
No, it doesn't matter. They'll be having their pizza party, and Clemson easily wins. I don't think Wake has a realistic chance this week.
Yeah, Wake Forest just dropped from the rankings this week, so
that's literally the only. I mean, I guess against maybe Virginia, maybe. I mean, that's not gonna be. It's gonna be a win, but I mean Virginia's not bad. I'm not gonna say that's I feel like if Virginia runs the table, the committee will probably put them in the top 25.
Yeah.
So it shows that. So it gives Clemson we have a good win because
right.
Virginia's not bad.
So Clemson. So I think we've established this. Clemson needs to win out in order to win. They will likely do that. LSU needs to beat Arkansas, and if they can do that, they will for sure be in. But I kind of want to talk about Ohio State here. So I'm going to throw out this scenario, and you guys tell me and you guys crank out what your top 4 is. Minnesota plays, and they get a loss either to Iowa or Wisconsin, but they still make it to the conference championship. So 1-loss Minnesota plays undefeated Ohio State. Minnesota beats Ohio State. Is Ohio State in that top 4 as a 1-loss non-conference champion?
Absolutely.
They would get in over Bama.
You look at their again. It
So
comes down to compare resumes.
1-loss non-conference champion Ohio State is going to get in over 1-loss non-conference champion Alabama and Oregon.
Yeah, let's take a look. Let's take a look at what Ohio State's resume would show at that point. If Ohio State runs the table through the conference championship, they would have a win over Cincinnati, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan. which are 4 wins compared to Alabama's at max 2. If A&M ends up sneaking into the rankings by the end of the season, at max 2,
They won't.
and Oregon at max 1 ranked win in the committee's playoff rankings. You look at that, and there is no comparison. I with all respect to the Pac-12, it's not even close, and Ohio State should easily be the number 4. The only way that gets muddied up is if Georgia somehow manages to beat LSU as well.
I agree with that. The only reason, The only reason why Oregon and Bama are even comparable is because both their straight to schedules are the same. Ohio State is clearly better schedules than both of them. So I think Ohio State's in the same thing as. I think they will earn the same. I think they're going to own the same respect as LSU. I feel like
Absolutely,
because if they run the table, they will get in the playoff regardless of what happens in the Big Ten championship. I think.
So,
but
one loss.
But
So
what
like
if LSU loses? That's the whole thing. Because then you're going to have one loss LSU. Then you're going to have one loss Minnesota conference champion. You're going to have conference championship.
one loss conference champion Georgia, one loss conference champion Minnesota, one loss non-conference champion LSU, one loss non-conference champion Ohio State, and probably an undefeated Clemson.
someone's getting left out, and it's
gonna
going
have
to be
two-
Ohio State in that scenario.
But I feel like this could be the dream scenario to maybe extend the playoff. That would be a dream
Well,
where maybe they
like I said,
consider
here-
it.
That
So-
is the one scenario where a one-loss Ohio State doesn't get in. That is the only scenario.
So,
I just
so
don't
here's
know.
so here's the thing about the extending of the thing, and I'm all with UCF. I've become an advocate for a larger playoff, but I saw an argument a couple days ago that really sold me on the 4 team.
Oh, I want to hear this.
So, because there's only 4 spaces in the playoff, all of these games become that much more important. And it adds the importance to all of these games in the like you need to the game Minnesota and Penn State was a playoff game, ideally. LSU and Alabama was a playoff game, ideally. Alabama and Auburn, when they play in the Iron Bowl, that's a playoff game. Penn State and Ohio State, when they meet in a couple weeks, that's a playoff game. And you look back in the season like, Georgia and Florida, that was possibly a playoff game because that team is going to meet in the SEC Championship. The SEC Championship game is a playoff game. So, yes, only 4 teams make it to the big dance, the Final Four, but ideally, because there's so few spaces, the playoff games are throughout the year, and it's extended throughout the year. And so, look, let's say it's an 18 playoff. A lot of people do this, but we're doing it anyway as well. If it's an 18 playoff, Oregon's in, Minnesota probably gets in. You make an argument for Penn State to get in. And yes, more teams have chances, but it's not as special. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and that is the common argument for for this 4-team playoff, and I'm gonna counter that with yes, if it's an 8-team playoff that is purely selected by the committee, that really these regular season games don't mean as much, but that's not the method I would want. I want 8 teams. I believe
The conference championships
5
all
Power
get in.
5 conference champions, your highest ranked group of 5 champion,
And the 2
and then
wild
the
cards.
committee selects 2 wild cards. That way, these games for that conference championship are still playoff games to give you that automatic bid. These games matter, and the committee is actually selecting fewer teams to make that playoff, and it even makes that more competitive. If you don't win your conference championship, in this scenario, if Oregon versus Utah, the winner is in. That's a playoff game. The loser, you're not guaranteed in, even with 8 spots. That does not lose any of the drama to me. These games still matter. Alabama still needs to beat Auburn to make this playoff in an 8-team scenario because they are not winning the SEC championship. Mm-hmm. These games still matter. Penn State, Minnesota, they still absolutely matter.
So in that scenario though, and I hate to say it, I mean, so let's say that scenario, let's say this season is based on that trajectory. LSU gets in as the SEC champion.
Yep.
Ohio State gets in as the Big Ten.
Yep.
Clemson gets in the ACC. Oklahoma, Baylor.
We'll go Oklahoma.
We'll go Oklahoma. I think, and then you say the Pac-12 Oregon. So that leaves, to me, look, there's 3 teams in the top 5 in the SEC. What's to stop them from saying, oh, these 3 teams, you're going to be in regardless.
Well, let's say Minnesota ends up running the table to the Big Ten championship, right? And they lose a close game to Ohio State. That to me is a better resume than Alabama is. I think a 2-loss Georgia team.
I can't see the committee ever saying, you know what, Minnesota, you're gonna get in over Alabama. Even if Minnesota's resume is better,
but
that's just, to me, and that's part of the reason why Alabama at 1 loss is still better than Minnesota, and Oregon 1 loss still better than Minnesota, because Minnesota's not a
name brand.
It's not a football school. Yeah. Air quotes.
Yeah. Let's look at Georgia though. A 2-loss Georgia team, you're not getting in.
Fair.
There will not be 3 SEC teams in.
Because of
Georgia, Auburn,
even if
Florida,
they give LSU a really good game, like a 3-point game, overtime.
The loss to South Carolina cancels that close game out. It's not going to matter. In that scenario, I would probably take a 1-loss Minnesota. I obviously Alabama's going to get in that scenario. I would even consider Baylor if Baylor only has 1 loss at that point. I
mean, with the Minnesota thing, they're still behind a 1-loss Utah loss to a 4-loss USC team. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's still, that's showing that they still haven't completely gotten they got a lot of the trust. Obviously, a ton. Not completely to put it over a team that's 4 losses. I mean, a team that lost to a 4-loss team with a 3rd-string quarterback.
That'll change if Minnesota wins this weekend.
That will. They will jump Utah if they beat. They may even jump Oregon if they may be at 6 if they beat Iowa this weekend. I think, in my personal opinion, they should be 5. Mm-hmm. If they beat Iowa, they should be 5. They're not going to do that though. I mean, they're not going to do that.
They're not getting above Bama this week. They have to win. They have to.
Now they beat Wisconsin. No, I think
they have to make it to the Big Ten championship.
That means beating Wisconsin. If they beat, I know they're going to beat Northwestern. Sorry, Pat Fitzgerald, but Northwest. I mean, I love him, but that team has just not been good this season. So I know they're going to win that game.
That's no problem.
But
KP, quick question for you.
Yeah.
In your 18 playoff model,
yep.
Where does Notre Dame fall?
They have to get a wild card.
They have to be a wild card.
They have to get one of those 2 committee selected spots because you can't win a conference championship. You're not a Group of 5 team, and Notre Dame would have to fall into one of the 2 things, and that is on Notre Dame to not. They can absolutely join the ACC if they wanted to, but the money
it will force them to join a conference. It will force them to join a conference. That's the thing.
It essentially doesn't change anything for them realistically. It knocks out. I mean, you think about it. It's instead of 4 spots they're fighting for 2, but 5 teams are going to be knocked out of their way because they're conference champions. If Notre Dame runs a table, they're getting one of those 2 wild card spots. Even a 1-loss Notre Dame.
I think the beauty in college football. It's also the thing that annoys me the most about college football, but it's also the thing that I like about it most is there's no correct way to win something. I mean, in any other sport, literally, in college sports, in every college sport is determined by a tournament or numbers, wins and losses, all of that. Professional sports, wins, losses, all things like that. College football is the one sport where it is determined by people and money. People and money. And that can be off-putting to some people. It's definitely been off-putting to me at points. But also, when we talk like this for nearly an hour about all these different scenarios and how exciting things could be and, oh, what if this happens or what if that happens, that's what I like about it. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of a bad situation almost. But even the 18 model that you did, it's a good one. It's not a perfect model, but it's definitely worthy of consideration. It's definitely something that would keep the excitement going. And I think, but also the 14 playoff, it's a way to keep several schools in it. It's a way to keep. It's almost like when Major League Baseball got the wild card coming in, and they were very against it at first because baseball was very traditional at first. It was, at first baseball was you win the American League, or you win your league and you go to the World Series, or you win your division, you play in the championship series, you go to the World Series. But then when they added wild cards, it opened the door for so many other markets, and it really did it really helped just the revenue for the sport. And then when they added the second wild card, it only did that tenfold. So there is, and it didn't necessarily take away from the purity of everything. The Nationals just won the World Series, and they were a wild card. So and it was proven in year 1 in this format that the number 14, the Ohio State, won. So And the thing is, like, I feel like any of these teams you can make an argument for that can win. The one team that I'm feeling a little icy on is Clemson, but I just think that
you're icy on Clemson.
I'm like not feeling it.
I think they're really, really good. They just haven't.
They
haven't played anyone. And
yeah,
they'll prove when they get to the playoffs. I firmly believe Clemson has a very realistic shot to win it all again.
That's true. They did win it last year. That's the thing.
No one gave them credit last year, and they blew Alabama out.
Remember, Dabo loves being an underdog.
That's true.
That's where his teams thrive the most.
I should love Clemson.
I'm sold on Clemson. I'm not sold on Clemson's schedule.
Clemson made my quarterback into a star, so I really should value Clemson a little more. But anyway, we're gonna call it quits now. But KP and Chris Wolf, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Definitely a whole lot of fun to talk with the two of you. So we had a double feature on the podcast this week because we did not have our show on Monday, but we are also preparing for a very special trivia episode of Hitting the Field. We're calling it Hitting the Feud. We ran it last year with a lot of success, and this year we are doing it again with a bit of a tweak to the format, but we're really looking forward to it. We're in the process of producing it now, writing the questions, producing the questions, getting the teams together, the families. It's going to be hitting the field like you've never seen it before. We're really excited about it. So be sure to tune in Monday at noon on YouTube for that. You can follow us on YouTube at Hitting the Field. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Hitting the Field as well. Kyle Partain, you can follow him, Kyle_Partain1. And then you can follow Chris Wolf at It's Chris_Wolf. You can follow me, Jeremy Brener. That's JeremyBrenner. And from inside the WNSC studio, thank you so much for tuning in to the Hitting the Field podcast. And you will hear from us again next week.
Change when I really hit the field. Undefeated champs, man, you know what's the deal. Tryna find a kid, I'm in the field doing drills. Boy, you just a sucker, you ain't never keep it real. 3 rings in my hand, I'm a warrior to the max. When I hang it up, they gon' have to give me plaques. Step up in the building and I only bring the facts. When I make a highlight, they gon' replay, run it back. Okay, always locked in, now I don't got time to lax. Saying he the best, he could take a lap. Batted 1,000 when you check the stats. Boy, is you ready? You ain't gotta ask. I just really hit the field. 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 Boy, I'm about to 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 hit the field.